Nice.
Whoa. Wait, is that same guy? All right. I just want to
I
make
know,
sure,
right?
confirm that it's the same person.
I
Oh,
can't tell you
you
how
missed this
happy my
part.
wife is.
You missed this part.
Yeah, it was pretty short last week. But this is 6 days old now. So this is 6 days old now. And this is 40 years old.
All right, everybody, at 6 p.m. So we'll get started this evening. So thank you all for joining the March 2nd Louisville City Council meeting. I'm Mayor Ashley Stolzman. Because of COVID-19, our meeting's being held electronically and is being recorded. To request permission to speak during public comment periods, an attendee will raise their hand by clicking the raise hand button that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. If you've called in by phone, you can dial *9 on the phone and a raised hand will appear on your behalf. When I acknowledge a member of the public and the clerk unmutes you, please state your name, your address, and your question, comments, or concern. Each person will have 3 minutes for their comments. If there's another topic you'd like to speak on, you'll need to just raise your hand again. Thank you for following these directions and helping us to maintain meeting decorum. City Clerk, could we please have a roll call?
Mayor Stolzman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Here.
Councilmember Brown?
Here.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Here.
Councilmember Fahey?
Here.
Councilmember Lay?
Here.
Councilmember Lipton?
Thank you, everyone. So that takes us to approving the agenda. So tonight, before we approve the agenda, I just want to comment that the business assistance package for the South Street Market has been moved off of our agenda tonight and to the agenda for March 16th. So if any folks are here for that, that got moved with enough time for us posting. So that won't be on our agenda this evening. And also I want to let folks know that I talked with city staff and they're going to bring forward a discussion item at a future council meeting to clarify the code around sledding in parks and to discuss designated sledding areas in open space. So I just want to clarify that's not on our agenda today, but we will discuss it at a future meeting when staff is ready to bring that forward for us. And so with that, could I please get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. The agenda is approved. So that brings us to public comments on items that are not on our agenda tonight or items that are on the consent agenda. So if any members of the public would care to comment on something that's not on our agenda or something that is on our consent agenda, please raise your hand at this time and let us know what you'd like to tell us. Seeing no one, that'll bring us back over to council to the consent agenda. So that takes us to the consent agenda. Any discussion of the consent agenda this evening? Councilmember Lay.
Yes, I just had one comment. At page 79 of the packet, we have a proclamation declaring the first Monday in March to be COVID-19 Victims and Survivors Memorial Day. I think we've just passed that. We had a nice proclamation about this, but I do think that maybe it's that I had a friend of mine that I grew up with passed away from complications relating to COVID-19 and was one of those people who actually did not believe that the virus was real. Now, I didn't talk to him in the very, very end, and he may have changed his mind. But this has just been a kind of an ongoing struggle, not so much in Louisville, but in a lot of places in the country. People have struggled with one, how serious the virus is, to the numbers of people that are affected and how you count them and all that. But the bottom line is we've lost a lot of people, and we've lost some people in Louisville. And I think it's good that we have a proclamation, but I think it's good every so often to remember that we've lost about 500,000 Americans to this, and I hope as our city manager said last week, that we're starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel because we could all use one. So thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Lay. Any other comments on the consent agenda? Seeing none, could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The consent agenda is approved. That takes us to council informational comments on pertinent items that are not on the agenda. Are there any council informational comments this evening? Councilmember Lay?
Yes, one moment. Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to encourage people to sign up for the task force that we have on racial equity in Louisville. And so you can do that online. And I believe the date, and the city manager can correct me, but I believe it's March 10th. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
The
correct.
deadline?
Yeah.
Okay. And we're looking for people both within Louisville and some without, who will have some thoughts about how welcoming we are to people of color and doing business here and living here and so forth. So if you are one of those people who is very interested, by all means, I'm going to volunteer myself and Kyle Brown, who worked on the initial piece, but you certainly can talk to either of us or the city manager or Megan Davis, who is also involved, and we're glad to provide more information. So thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Lay. Any other council comments? Thank you. Seeing no other. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Fahey. Geez, Louise, it's like I had 1 week off and I forgot how to do this. Councilmember Fahey.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to quickly express our, I think, general whole council frustrations with all of the COVID restrictions, both for restaurants, for businesses, for when you have to wear a mask, for all the not being able to do in-person schooling. But I want everyone to know that the restrictions that we're putting in place are because of ones that are coming down either from the state or from BVSD. And we don't have control over, for example, whether or not schools are held in person or over the internet. So I just want everyone to know that we are just as frustrated and tired of all of the restrictions, and we do whatever we can to make it easier for everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Fahey. Any other comments? All right, seeing none, that takes us to our city manager's report.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Just wanted to, you probably saw on Friday that there was a change to the vaccine distribution timeline, and those folks who are in 1B3 and 1B4. So the mayor's message went out today with that information, and we'll continue to get information out to folks about how they can sign up through their providers and or pharmacies or other opportunities. So and we're also obviously working with Boulder County Public Health, and as we hear that additional vaccine becomes available, we'll also continue to provide any information and communication we can on opportunities for vaccination for the public in our community. So just wanted to follow up with that and continue to check the website and the newsletter that just went out as well for information. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. And that takes us to our first order of regular business tonight, which is an update on the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport noise. And Emily Hogan, our Assistant City Manager, Communications and Special Projects, is going to give us a staff presentation. And then we'll take public comment on the agenda item and then have some council discussion.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Staff is presenting an update on airport noise mitigation efforts, which is listed on the 2021 Council Work Plan. Since staff's last update in October, the city wrapped up its contract with consultant ABC x2 with the final item from the 2020 scope of work to develop education and outreach materials for the airport to use with pilots, flight schools, tenants, air traffic control, and the general public. We also hosted a meeting with the airport to discuss implementation of such efforts. Most efforts have, over the past few months, have focused on the Community Noise Roundtable. The Roundtable held its kickoff meeting on January 11th. The agenda consisted of introductions from member communities and representatives, a presentation from RMMA on the airport's background, and discussion of meeting logistics like board elections, public comment, facilitator options, and notice of meetings. The Roundtable held its second meeting on February 8th. The agenda consisted of election of chair and vice chair, public comment, facilitator interviews and selection, confirmation of regular meeting dates and format, and an update from the RMMA director. Superior Representative Trustee Lasis was elected chair, and Louisville Representative Councilmember Lipton was elected vice chair. It was decided that 30 minutes of public comment would be offered at each meeting, with 3 minutes allotted per speaker. At the February meeting, there were 10 individuals who shared public comment. 3 consultants were interviewed for the role of meeting facilitator. Primacy Strategy Group was awarded the contract, which will be funded by member dues. Primacy has extensive experience working with airports and surrounding communities on noise-related issues, and actually helped to form the Centennial Airport Noise Roundtable here in Colorado. There was also discussion of potentially hiring a technical consultant like ABC x2 to assist with data collection, flight modeling, etc. The Roundtable has asked the FAA to present at the March 8th meeting to discuss the process for advancing noise mitigation recommendations and any other questions from Roundtable members. Louisville has also asked that a traffic heat map produced from one of our residents be included on the agenda for discussion. The city does not have funds budgeted for airport consultant services in 2021. If there is interest in continuing this work outside of the Roundtable, similar to what we did with ABC x2 the past few years, staff can prepare a request for proposals for an airport impacts consultant. Areas of interest may include aviation, data, technical, legal, environmental, and/or advocacy support. With that, staff is happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Emily Hogan. That was fantastic for an update. And so I'll turn it over to members of the public, if any members of the public would care to comment on this agenda item this evening. And for those dialing in by phone, if you dial *9, a hand will appear on your behalf. And then for any members of the public who've logged in with their computer, you can raise your hand at the bottom of your screen. All right, thank you, everybody. Seeing none, that takes us back over to council, and I'll turn it over to Councilmember Lipton, who is heading up this for the City Council. Councilmember Lipton? You're muted.
Always happens. Thank you, Mayor. I just want to first thank Emily and Megan for the great work they've been doing. Staff has been terrific, supporting us and supporting all the efforts that we've had to date. I'm very excited about the roundtable. I think the membership is very strong, and I think the members are genuinely enthusiastic about looking at the noise issues and knowing that this is going to take a while. There's no immediate solution to this. This is definitely going to play the long game. And, you know, and just to remind the council as well as perhaps the public that the roundtable is limited to looking at noise issues. And I know there are other issues that weigh on the minds of our residents, including other forms of environmental issues related to parts falling off aircraft, you know, things like that. But, you know, the role of the roundtable by the bylaws and what we have all agreed to is limited to noise. And that's what our goals to be. And we're going to be working closely with the FCC and, you know, other jurisdictions to figure out how the noise might be better managed or mitigated. But that's going to take a long time. These things typically take several years in order to actually see results. But I think everybody is committed, and you know, everybody, you know, every community has different priorities, but I think that everybody understands what the impacts have been, particularly to the municipalities on the north. I also want to thank Matt Jones for his support. He's the representative from the county commissioners, and he's been very, very good to work with and very supportive. And I appreciate him being there for us, you know, as we move forward with this. There is a document in the packet which Emily touched on, and I think a new packet, you find it on page 212. And the old packet, I believe it's on page 233. And this is what we're calling, oh gosh, now I'm seeing that my numbers are wrong. I just looked at it a little while ago. Well, it's 233 on the old package. This is the noise map, the heat map that we did, and I really do need to find it, so just bear with me.
Did I?
Emily, do you have the page number? I thought I had written it down correctly.
Yeah, I have it as 212 in the new packet.
So Councilmember Lipton, I screen shared. Can you see that on your screen? Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah. So I'm actually working on the old packet, so I'm almost there. And the old packet's page 233. So I do want to talk about this for just a moment. We're going to actually have it on the agenda for discussion at the roundtable meeting next Monday. And this was prepared by one of our residents, Michael Barrick, who has been very helpful in looking at data for us, you know, as the city of Louisville. He lives in Louisville. He's a data scientist. He can do some amazing things with data and mapping and collecting the information. But, you know, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, I think this is it. And you can see the, you know, the dark areas, the dark lines are the trajectory of the aircraft leaving and coming to Rocky Mountain Airport, and their flight patterns. So you can see Louisville in particular and Superior are really taking the brunt of the flights that are coming out of or going into Rocky Mountain Airport. And then you can see there's other impacts to other communities, but most of the impacts are to the north, and there are a variety of complicated reasons for that. And we believe most of this traffic is really for the single propeller airplanes that are, you know, continuing to buzz over our homes and businesses. And you can see what they're trying to do is go north and then east generally, because that is the so-called practice areas. This is where they go to, you know, to practice their various maneuvers, particularly the student pilots, the instructors. So to get from point A to, which is well, actually the airport, to point B, which is north and east of Boulder, they take probably what's the shortest route, and that's turns out to be over Louisville and then parts of Boulder and Gun Barrel and what have you. So I thought this was very interesting. And this heat map is depicting the data from last September. And September, it wasn't a magic month and it wasn't the busiest month, but we thought it was kind of indicative of, you know, typical months. And actually it perhaps understates the impacts, because there were 3 or 4 days in September that, because of the snowstorm and the freezing conditions, that, you know, the flights actually diminished for a few days. So, but you can see what the impacts were just for the month of September. And it also, in the table that follows, we have the overflight minutes per day, which gives you an indication of how many minutes that we're enduring this over Louisville in terms of minutes per day. And also, as comparison, we penciled in Arvada. So Arvada is generally south and I guess west of the airport. And they're not in this traffic pattern, traffic zone, and you can see, for them, it's a smaller issue, as it is Westminster, Broomfield, and other municipalities south of the airport, for a variety of reasons, including traffic coming from DIA and the fact that, if they're going north, into the practice areas, they certainly don't want to fly, say, over Arvada first in order to get to where their destination is. And then also the next table shows the flights per day. So not to dwell on this, it's just I thought Mike did some terrific work to visually kind of paint the picture of what the situation is for our community and Superior and others. And hopefully this would be a good tool for the roundtable to use to better understand why we're looking for changes at Rocky Mountain as Superior and others are. Although our issues are different than Superior's. Ours is one of overflight, trying to get to the practice area. Superior is different in the sense that they're very close to the runway. So, for planes coming in and out of the airport, they almost by necessity fly over Superior in order to gain altitude in order to make a turn. Then the turn generally comes over Louisville and then going north and east. So anyway, I don't want to dwell on this. If you have any questions, we can certainly talk about it anytime you want. We are, like Emily mentioned, meeting regularly once a month for a couple hours a month, and the public is invited to join us and be able to participate in those meetings. So anyway, I think we're off to a good start. And like I said, Emily or I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Lipton, and Councilmember Brown's the alternate on the airport roundtable. Do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mayor. No, I just appreciate Councilmember Lipton's leadership. I also appreciate, to Councilmember Lipton's point, the great engagement that we have gotten from the community of Louisville on this particular issue. I think there's a lot of interest by many of those on the roundtable in doing something here, but it's going to take some work and it's going to take some time. Even if the roundtable can come up with recommendations that everyone can agree on, it is then still in the hands of the FAA. So we will continue to work to get consensus, work with our fellow members, and I'm really glad to see Councilmember Lipton as the vice chair of the roundtable. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lay.
Yeah, I just had a couple of quick questions. One for Councilmember Lipton. This was just sort of a point of information. Can you remind us who's on that the roundtable, and not necessarily the people, but I mean, who do they represent and how many of them are there?
So there's Jefferson County, Westminster, Arvada, Broomfield, Boulder County, Superior, and Louisville. I hope I didn't forget somebody, Emily. I think that was the list.
And there's what, one person and a alternate from each of those?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a manageable size, not too unwieldy in terms of that.
Yeah, it's a great size. And yeah, I was reflecting if we included a lot of other communities that have interest but not impacted quite as much, then it might have gotten a bit unwieldy. And the other part of this, at some level, this becomes a zero-sum game. And to divert traffic, unless you reduce the amount of traffic, to divert traffic away from us means that traffic is going to go other places. And hopefully it might be along roadway corridors or open space or areas that don't have residences necessarily, or perhaps businesses, but it's a matter of shifting the traffic. So, it's the other communities are, watching their interests pretty carefully in all this, just like we would.
Second question that I had is, I was looking at the work plan, And given that we just came off hours, of course, I've sort of got my antenna up. It's like sort of 2 pages of priorities and substantial. Do you think, what's your crystal ball as to the achievability of that? Do you guys think you're going to get through those highest priorities?
Well, I think it's difficult to say. The roundtable is starting to work on its own work plan. And I think at some point we're going to have to, I mean, in terms of what we can affect individually as a community is quite limited. What we can do commonly with everybody else and through the roundtable, I mean, if the limits are not as narrow. So basically we got to integrate our thinking and our work plan in with the roundtables, and that will probably be the common direction. I'll say as one observation, and I'll just throw this out, there was actually a webinar that the FAA did last week on noise and some research they've been doing, and it is very interesting, very, very thorough, very long report, statistically valid, and you know their conclusion at the end is that, well, the more aircraft activity, the more noise, the more impacts there are to communities. I mean, it was very simple at the end, and yeah, so kind of belabored the obvious, but it also showed that the FAA is getting pressure at the federal level to think about this stuff a little bit differently, and it's not just for operational efficiency. They got to start thinking about impacts to communities and localities and residents, you know, as they start thinking long term in designing flight patterns and considering airport expansions and things like that. And I think that's because Congress is starting to get the message from their constituents, and that's slowly being translated then to the FAA. The FAA works very slowly. So that's a cultural change. I think the FAA will probably have to develop over time, and the actual implementation of, you know, those values is going to take even more time.
The final question was sort of a follow-on to the priorities in the work plan. And I guess this may be a question for Emily or Megan, or perhaps a city manager, which is, in looking at that work plan, there's obviously a lot of work for staff to be doing throughout the year. And this is an important issue for us. So I don't make light of that, but do you have a sense from a staff standpoint whether that that work plan is going to require any more or less work than you had anticipated going into this?
I can speak to that. I think, you know, from a staff perspective so far this year, the workload, you know, there's a high level of work in 2020 as we were completing the baseline assessment and, you know, establishing strategies and prioritizing. I think the impact on staff is more limited this year, especially through so much of that work going through the roundtable. I do think, you know, there's the outstanding question of is there any type of consultant work that the city wishes to pursue this year outside of the roundtable? And then also, you know, whatever topics come up at the roundtable, staff will be able to help support and gather data and help with analysis. So I think it's probably the same or less from staff perspective compared to last year.
Thank you, Councilmember Lay. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, your question was answered?
Well, I thought my question was answered. Now I'm not sure it was answered, but Assistant City Manager Emily Hogan just touched on what I was wondering about, and that was the consulting. So, so you're talking about outside of the work that's being done by the roundtable. So it would be additional work. Is that defined somewhere?
We have in staff's memo, there's a list, you know, it's a potential scope of work that the city could look further into outside of the roundtable, just specifically for Louisville. Let me get a page number.
Oh, that's the on page 84.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, thank you. So my question is to Councilor Lipton and Councilor Brown. What is your recommendation with regard to the potential consultant services listed on page 84 of the staff report?
So my sense right now, it's a bit premature to be out hiring a consultant and spending resources on a consultant until we understand better what our needs are, and whether or not we should be doing this alone outside the roundtable. And there probably will be some more expenses associated with the roundtable. One thing we're probably going to talk about is the need to do some noise monitoring, since we really don't have any baseline data for things like that. We don't know how expensive that would be, but it may lead to an additional ask of the various participants for a little bit more funding in order to do something like that. But there's always a possibility we might have legal questions or technical questions that we need some consultant to help us out so we can be better participants in the roundtable. And I think that's kind of what that placeholder would be for.
Thank you, Councilor Lipton. I think at this point in time, and you and Councilor Brown are right in the middle of this. I appreciate your perspective and your patience. I actually have less patience than you do, which is maybe unusual. I don't know, but I want to make sure that the members on the roundtable and staff feel like they have available resources, that they don't have to keep coming back to council. So if we're talking about the amounts that are listed in here, I think there aren't amounts, but I want to make sure the resources are available. We don't have to keep going back and forth to council. So if we can maybe quantify that and maybe create a placeholder, I'm going to be in support, because if something comes up and the roundtable wants to do something and we need to find a way to participate, I want that to be already funded, if you will. So I look forward to more discussion on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, just to wrap that point up, I think that's a critical point that we need to ensure that everybody's on the same page of. So if we could just see, maybe a thumbs up from council members, if people are comfortable saying, on the order of magnitude that is described in the packet, do we want to make sure staff and that the members that are on the task force know that we're supportive of consultation work, that they need to support their progress going forward, and that when that happens, just bring it forward in a budget amendment with the rest of the budget amendment. Does that seem like a reasonable path to everybody? So I see thumbs up all around. So that is what we'll do. And so staff and the task force members will work on that, and it would come back formally only through a budget amendment at some point in time if needed. So that'll just continue the conversation forward, and Councilmember Fahey was next in the queue.
Thank you, Mayor. I just got my question answered.
All right, right on. So Councilmember Lipton, do you need anything else from council to be supportive of your work?
No, I think the city has been very supportive and is taking some leadership role in this, and I think we're in a good place. We just need to develop some level of patience and let the process take its course.
All right, well, thank you to the city staff for all your dedication on this. Thank you to Councilmember Lipton and Councilmember Brown for putting in the extra effort on this. And thank you for the great update tonight. And I'll just ask City Manager Balser and Assistant City Manager Hogan, is that enough direction from council for this evening?
Yes, that works. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that
Mayor, are we going to have public comment on this item?
we did. So on just a resolution or regular business, we have one round of public comment. And so we did have that round of public comment on this agenda item. And on an ordinance, we have 2 rounds of public comment by our city charter. So you'll see that on the next agenda item, I'll call for public comment 2 times, but on this agenda item, there's 1 round of public comment. So if in the future council members want to change that, we should just change that in our council rules of procedure. So that takes us to our next agenda item, and that's water rights, acquisitions, and dispositions. We're going to talk about an ordinance tonight, which is Ordinance 1804, Series 2021, an ordinance approving the transfer of city-owned water rights in the new Coal Ridge Ditch Company and approving an agreement in connection therewith. This is the second reading and our public hearing. It was advertised in the Daily Camera on February 21st, 2021. And we'll have a presentation at the same time about resolution number 13, series 2021, a resolution approving an agreement for the purchase and sale of CBT units of Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District between the city of Louisville and Thomas E. Shonka, and authorizing temporary use permits in connection therewith. I'm going to open the public hearing, and I'll ask council members if they have any disclosures to make this evening. Seeing none, I'm going to turn it over to Corey Peterson. He's our Deputy Director of Utilities, and he's going to give us a staff presentation this evening. After his presentation, we'll have the first round of public comment, council discussion, and then you'll see that second round of public comment. And then I'll close the public hearing and we'll take action this evening. So Corey, if you'll take it away.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. There are 2 recommended actions before you tonight related to the city's water rights. The first action is an ordinance approving an agreement to sell the city's interest in the new Coal Ridge Ditch Company. Developments since the February 16th first reading has allowed for simplification of the agreement and accompanying ordinance, which is highlighted in the revisions included in the packet. These changes are not significant and the terms of the agreement remain the same. Sale proceeds will be used to enhance other water rights and will have a greater benefit than what is currently being realized. The second action is Resolution 13 that will facilitate the acquisition of 13 CBT units. CBT units are easily integrated in the city system and will provide additional water supply for this year. These units make up about 4% of the long-term plan to increase firm yield as outlined in the Water Master Plan. The city's attorney's office, consulting water engineering firm Spronk, and our water rights legal counsel Hill Pollock have completed extensive development and review of these documents, and staff confidently recommend approval of both actions. With that, staff are prepared to go into additional detail as required.
Thank you, Corey. And just as we noted at the beginning of the meeting, Alan Hill is here, and this was just noted by Corey, our attorney that specializes in water. And so with that presentation, I'll turn it over for our first round of public comment on this agenda item and ask public if they have any comments to please raise their hand at this time, and folks who've dialed in by phone to dial *9, and a handle will appear that I can see and I can call on you. Seeing no comments, that takes us back over to council questions and comments on this agenda item. Our first comment is from the chair of the Utility Committee, Councilmember Lipton. Councilmember Lipton?
Thank you, Mayor. I had 3 questions, and the first question is in the first page, well, of the summary in the packet, and it says that basically staff recommends the purchase of the units. In addition, staff recommends approval of the resolution to allow for the temporary use of these units. And I guess my question is, why are we referring to the temporary use?
So Councilmember Lipton, I can respond to that. So the way Northern works on the transfer is it requires several readings to go through their process before they move the units to our official ownership. So you do a temporary transfer early on so that we can get access to the water sooner. So it just allows us to use it a little bit sooner than if we just delayed and waited for it to go all the way through the process.
Okay, thank you. That's a good answer. My second question is there seem to be a lot of moving parts to the overall strategy and the related transactions. And I was wondering if staff could comment, or perhaps Alan could comment on which of the various components might require any adjudication, and what would be the likelihood of litigation in any of the water court actions?
Alan?
With respect to the CBT, well, first, good evening, Mayor and Council. It's nice to be in front of you. With respect to the CBT water, that is an administrative process in front of the Northern Board. There is no water court litigation required to change the use of the previously irrigation units into Louisville's municipal use. With respect to the new Coleridge Ditch Company shares, those will be transferred to the purchaser, CK Ventures, and then CK Ventures will be responsible for taking that water through the water court process. They probably have an end user, another municipality that's farther east and can actually physically and legally get these diverted at a higher yield than what the city of Louisville can. We will be involved in that case as an opposer to make sure that as they transfer that water, that our interests in other water rights in the basin are not adversely impacted. We don't think they will be, but there will be some legal fees and engineering to Hill and Pollock and to Spronk, and we'll coordinate with city staff on the level of opposition to that. Again, we will support that, but we need to make sure that the I's get dotted and the T's get crossed in any water court decree that involves our former water right.
Okay, so Alan, would there be any contingencies in our contract to do the purchase?
No, initially, the final payment was to be delayed until after the water court proceeding was done. The final agreement is cash to the city up front, and then the purchaser moves forward with the water court application, and there is no contingency in the agreement based upon outcome of litigation that could take 2 or 3 years.
Okay, good, thank you. My next question, I think, Steph, could you just remind us, I think it was stated at some point that if any of these pieces fall apart, then we can cancel all the pieces or get a chance to revisit and perhaps cancel all the various pieces. Is that correct?
Councilman Lipton, that is correct. So this begins a 180-day due diligence period, which allows us to go through all of the various items. And if at any point those fail, it allows us to get out of the contract as needed.
Okay, thanks, Corey. And my final question is that in the fiscal impacts statement towards the end, it states that the remaining 4.4 million will be incorporated in the water fund for future acquisitions and capital projects. And I was wondering if it would be useful to designate the remaining funds towards water purchases or projects related to conveying future water purchases. So it just doesn't, it becomes kind of not a sense of trust, but it's designated for water acquisition instead of just getting thrown into the overall capital fund for the utility.
Yes, and that was our understanding from our last conversation. So when it was listed as capital project, that is what that means. It would be capital projects associated with increasing water supply or those type of things. It wouldn't necessarily just be going to general water fund projects. So,
okay, so
important clarification, but that's staff's understanding.
Yeah, so if we could somehow incorporate that into the record, and I would say something like for water right acquisitions and closely associated conveyance projects, or something in line with what you said about the delivery of that. But I just like to maybe have that in the minutes or somewhere in the record. And thanks to staff. You guys have done a terrific job on this. Thank you.
So just want to thank you very much, Councilmember Lipton, and thank you staff for answering those questions. I just want to take a moment and get a little help from our city attorney, Kathleen Kelly. just so I can clarify the record on something. So we got an addendum to the packet today from the city clerk, and I want to ensure that we incorporate that addendum into the hearing on this agenda item. So what would be the best way for me to do that?
Thank you, Mayor. Kathleen Kelly, City Attorney here. I think just acknowledging that the addendum has been received and is made a part of the record of the hearing on second reading of the ordinance would be sufficient.
Thank you very much.
Just to clarify, the addendum is a revised agreement, correct? That's what you're referring to?
Yes, so I just want to make clear of the record that the addendum that we received from the clerk this afternoon, the revised agreement is entered into the record on second hearing. And then the second follow-up part of my question to the city attorney is, when we make a motion on these agenda items, do we need to acknowledge that in the motion that we're using the revised version, or is there a better way to do that?
I don't think that you need to include that in the motion, since you have made the revised agreement part of the record of this public hearing. That's what the ordinance will approve, or the resolution rather.
Thank you very much for that clarification. And then the just third point, just to make sure we're clear, would it be best if we made a motion just here to acknowledge Councilmember Lipton's point for the record, just that council would like to give direction, council would make a motion to give staff direction to use the proceeds from the sale for water rights acquisition or capital projects associated with increasing water. Would that be the appropriate way to handle that?
Yes, that certainly would be an appropriate way to handle it. And that way it would be recorded in the meeting minutes. If council prefers, it could also be incorporated into the ordinance itself that approves the agreement for the sale transaction. It just is your preference about how you would like that memorialized.
So thank you very much, City Attorney Kelly, for help with those things. So Councilmember Lipton, a little later on after we've had all the public comment, I'll turn to you and ask if you could just make a motion to give staff direction to your point so that we can make sure that it makes it into the record. Is that all right? And so I'll ask you that later in the meeting.
Okay, I'll try. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lipton. And so that'll take us to more council questions and comments. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have two comments, and then I had a question about this very same item that we've been discussing here, but I just will make a comment on that as well. So this is terrific work by staff, no question about it in my mind. So I really appreciate all the work that Kurt and Corey and all those others have been involved, and of course Alan Hill and all the other people that have been involved. The second point I'd like to make is, this isn't something that was initiated by City Council. This was initiated by staff. And the reason why I'm pointing that out is we're talking about strategically positioning the city of Louisville water rights and coming up with a long-term plan here. And so I want to acknowledge that terrific work and leadership and looking out for the long-term interest of the city. And so Corey and Kurt and Alan and all have been involved. Thank you very much for that. I had the exact same comment as Councilor Lipton on the fiscal impact. I believe the intent, as we were all looking at it being related to the acquisition, and if there are any capital expenses, that they're related to either future or current acquisitions. So however we can make sure that that is part of the record of our intent, I think that's very important. Because when things get read 5, 10, or 20 years from now, we want to make sure that our intent is clear. So, but I had the exact same comment, and I appreciate the direction from the city attorney. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other council member questions or comments? All right, seeing none, that takes us to our second round of public comment and our final round of public comment on this agenda item. If any members of the public would care to comment, please raise your hand at this time. You can also, if you've dialed in by phone, raise your hand by dialing *9. And if you've logged on through the computer system, you'll raise your hand in the panel at the bottom of the screen. All right. Seeing no comment, that'll take us back over to additional council discussion and potentially accepting motions if there are no other comments or discussion. Seeing no hands, Councilmember Lipton, did I rush you too fast? Were you able to come up with something?
Somebody could talk for 30 seconds. I think I could do it.
All right, Councilmember Brown.
Mayor, I can talk for 30 seconds at any time, any moment.
Councilmember Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I absolutely support the work that the staff has done. It's a great opportunity for the city. And I also very much support Councilmember Lipton's proposed amendment to make sure that we are taking the proceeds of this sale and going out and buying additional water rights and some of the associated costs with it. I think that's the right way to go. And as we've seen from just the historic increases of water, water is only going to get more expensive. And so we need to shore up our supply as quickly as we can with the most senior water rights that we can find. So hopefully that gives Councilmember Lipton enough time. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. All right, Councilmember Lipton, what do we have?
Thanks, guys. Okay, so I think I would add a condition to the resolution. I think the ordinance would be fine the way it is unless you want to do it differently. So I would move we approve ordinance number 1804 series 2021.
Is there a second? All right, is there any discussion of the motion on the ordinance? All right, seeing no comments, could we please have a roll call on the approval of ordinance 1804 series 2021?
Councilmember Dickinson,
Yes.
Mayor Stolzman,
Yes.
Councilmember Lipton,
Yes.
Councilmember Lay,
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
All right, Councilmember Lipton.
So I would move that we approve resolution number 13 series 2021, but add a condition. I think that might be the best way to handle this. And the condition would simply read that the net proceeds from the transactions be dedicated to the future acquisition of water rights or projects closely associated with the purchase and conveyance of new water rights.
And I'll just ask City Attorney Kelly if that seems like an appropriate place and way to do that.
Well, the resolution is for the purchase, as I understand this transaction. The ordinance is for the sale. So when you're talking about the proceeds, attaching a condition to the resolution buying additional water probably isn't the best place to put that, but we can have the city clerk just memorialize that condition on this transaction generally. The two of these came on the agenda together tonight.
So
would it be better to attach it to the ordinance then?
Well, so Councilmember Lipton, why don't we just make a motion to give staff direction to use the funds for that purpose? So that, I mean, if that's okay with you.
That is fine.
So just to summarize what your motion was, it's a motion to give staff direction to use the proceeds from the sale, and then will you repeat the statement that you made?
Yeah, that'd be fine. Oh, you want me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
That the net proceeds from the transactions be dedicated to the future acquisition of water rights or projects closely associated with the purchase and conveyance of new water rights.
Thank you. Any council discussion on that motion as it's worded?
Second.
Oh, thank you. There's a second from Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. City Attorney Kelly, does that seem like an appropriate way to do it?
It does. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And then just give Corey Peterson, our Deputy Director of Utilities, a chance, or Kurt Coer, our Public Works Director, a chance if there's any question about that staff direction.
No, Mayor, very clear. Thank you.
Right
I
on.
I would do a friendly amendment to that to say new or existing water rights. Some conveyance infrastructure may help us increase existing water rights. If that makes sense.
Well, I don't want to, I don't want this thing to grow so that you can almost defend any project, capital project in this paradigm. So I'm trying to look for a narrow approach. If that is narrow enough, what Kurt suggested, I guess that's fine. I just don't want this to be too expansive.
Yeah, I think new or existing water rights would really just be water rights or pipes to increase our ability to get more of the existing rights we have, or possibly reservoir type investments that increase capacity, or deals that would increase capacity.
I think at some level that becomes just another capital project. But I'm willing to be flexible. I just want the future people dealing with this in the future to understand the intent.
Okay. I mean, I would say if we're doing our job, we should aggressively spend these funds and not let water get more expensive or let projects get more expensive. So I see it as a near-term issue, and Corey and I hope we have a long shelf life, so we're not going to go against what council says.
So Council Member Lipton, I think if you'll just read it one more time, it sounds like a great proposal. And as it's just a motion to give staff direction, if we do run into a problem with the way we worded it, we could always give clarifying direction at a future council meeting.
Yeah, so what I proposed was that the net proceeds from the transactions be dedicated to the future acquisition of water rights or projects closely associated with the purchase and conveyance of new water rights. I think what our Public Works Director is suggesting is that we broaden this to allow for the conveyance of new or existing water rights.
Yeah, I think he's saying existing water rights that would still increase the water portfolio, like if we're underutilizing existing rights.
I'm not sure if that's a distinction with a difference. I'm certainly not going to die on the sword.
So I'm comfortable as the way you've worded it, and I think it's pretty strong. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, are you comfortable with the way it's worded still?
I am. I think it's the intent I was looking for. Thank you.
Discussion from other council members. Would council members like to offer any friendly amendments or make changes to the way it's proposed at the moment? Are people clear what we'll be voting on? I want to make sure of that as well. I see some general head nodding. I'm losing some of you. Okay, good. Now I see all heads nodding. That's good. Okay, so no further discussion on this point. So since this is just direction to staff, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. And so Councilmember Lipton, you're doing a great job. You want to make a motion on resolution 13 for us?
Sure. I'll move that we approve resolution number 13, series 2021 as presented by staff.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Fahey seconded the motion. Is there any discussion on resolution 13? All right, City Clerk Muth, could we please have a roll call vote on that?
Councilmember Fahey,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Lipton,
Yes.
Mayor Stolzman,
Yes.
Councilmember Maloney,
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson,
Yes.
Councilmember Lay.
Yes.
Thank you to all the parties involved. That takes us to our city attorney's report this evening.
I have no report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. The next agenda items, council comments, committee reports, and identification of future agenda items. So we'll go through the committees first and then find if council members have future agenda items. Economic Vitality Committee.
No report. We're meeting on March 13th or
Great.
19th, sorry.
Finance Committee.
No report.
Utility Committee. I think I read your lips to be no report. Colorado Communities for Climate Action.
I sent an email to each of you about the latest issues that CC4CA is dealing with, and there we will be verifying or re-verifying our commitment to the organization and our goals, and paying our annual dues.
Thank you, Councilmember Fahey. Commuting Solutions,
Report.
Consortium of Cities. No report from Consortium of Cities.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm paying attention. No report. Thank you.
Downtown Business Association Street Fair.
Yes, the Street Fair Committee actually met this afternoon. You know, it's still challenging trying to plan for Street Fair for the summer. It's just an evolving thing, and we're trying to buy as much time as we possibly can, but conditions are changing. And we're trying to position Street Fair, if there is a Street Fair, for whatever the conditions might be at some future date that we just don't know what the situation will be. I think, well, specifically, we are intending to live by whatever the county restrictions are for these types of gatherings. There is interest on the part of the state to allow for you know, musical concerts and, you know, other events like that, you know, and open that up a bit. But right now we're kind of focusing on attendance of perhaps 500, and then be able to scale up from that. And even doing 500 is very challenging. Tentatively though, we have chosen at least a window, and we're looking at starting in late July and ending in early September. So that would be a fairly significant change from the traditional approach. I think we're all realizing Street Fair scales up fairly easily, but it doesn't scale down easily because the amount of fixed costs and you know, the other issues. Also, you know, greatly interested in what the outcome is with closing Main Street, how that might affect Front Street. So anyway, it's a good group of people that are doing the right kind of thinking, and they're doing the right kind of framing, but it's obvious we need at least another month or two to be able to figure out what we can put together. And the goal for this, obviously, is to help reactivate the downtown as early as we possibly can. And there are different ways of doing that, and we'll be looking at different models to do that under the general context of Street Fair. So that's what I can share with you after today's meeting.
Thank you, Councilmember Lipton. Denver Regional Council of Governments, we're working on the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan still, and CDOT has worked out their differences with the communities they were withholding Safer Main Streets funding from, and I believe we'll be able to give out the rest of the Safer Main Streets grants at our meeting later this month. Joint Interest Committee between Superior or Lafayette.
No report.
Thank you. Mayor and Commissioners Coalition, we're meeting Thursday. Metro Mayor's Caucus. We've been working really hard on the state transportation funding bill. So the state has, some of the legislators have been going around talking about doing modernization of the transportation funding at the state this year, and working on passing a fee package that would, they're talking about modernization and addressing the decreases in transportation funding that we've seen. And they're talking about what they're calling future-proofing the revenues. So it's all very tricky because the voters also made it clear last fall that new fees need to go to the voters unless they are in an existing enterprise or they raise less than $100,000 a year. So there are those areas where the voters said it was all right to increase fees, but they're very specific and limited. So we want to make sure we're judicious about that, and that any fee increases would be in those areas. So it would be in something like a high performance transportation enterprise or a bridge enterprise that's an existing enterprise. So a new one wouldn't need to be created. So that in itself lends to a number of challenges. And of course, there's a lot of different special interest groups interested in getting transportation funding. And we have a lot of challenges as a state around transportation funding. So the Metro Mayor's Caucus is working on making sure multimodal transportation gets a fair share and trying to increase the amount that the urban areas get to keep. So in every funding package, the urban areas support the rest of the state because we have the majority of the population and we all love using, all the roads in the state. So we do our part to make sure we're paying into the whole statewide system. But in normal packages, we get about 45 cents for every dollar we put in. And on this additional funding, we're hoping to get closer to 75 cents for a dollar that we put in. So to get up to that level, that would mean that other areas wouldn't be able to get as much more. So they're used to getting about $2.25 for every dollar they put in, and we're asking them to take $1.50 instead. So that kind of conversation is really challenging for people. It's talking about everyone's trying to get the most they can for their area. It's very hard to get people to compromise. And so, people come in with these platforms and they're immovable objects because they voted on them as a group, and we're trying to get everybody to come to a compromise. So I'll keep you posted and let you know how that all goes. The next one is the Revitalization Commission.
Nothing.
Thank you. Excel Energy Futures.
No report this time.
Advanced agenda and identification of future agenda items and general council comments. I just want to add that some of our partners have asked for testimony tomorrow on a natural gas bill. So there is a bill that's going to be introduced tomorrow to forbid local governments from banning natural gas to new builds. This, Municipal League has taken a position of oppose on it because it's seen as a local control issue where, our building codes, we restrict all kinds of things and require all kinds of things through building codes. And that has been long held to be a local government's prerogative to ensure public safety and health. And many plans, including the governor's greenhouse gas emission roadmap, have calls for local governments to make changes to make carbon emissions in buildings come down. And one of the tactics that's listed in many of those plans, including the governor's carbon emission greenhouse gas roadmap, is to work on strategies for beneficial electrification, which is looking for opportunities to use electricity rather than gas in buildings. So I'll be testifying in opposition of that bill on our behalf tomorrow, and other folks are welcome to sign up as well. You can this year testify remotely by WebEx. And so it'll be the first time I've ever done that, and I'll let you know how it goes. Any other council general comments, future agenda, identification of future agenda items? Councilmember Lipton.
I did remember to unmute. So I appreciate the mayor's comments about the issue of sledding, because I was quite inundated with comments from my constituents and residents in Ward 2. And I just wanted to, say a few things in terms of our strategy on this. And I think in my thinking about it is that there are some obvious limitations either in the charter or in the municipal code prohibiting sledding. But I also know there have been other issues and concerns about the use of open space for other types of activities. And I think maybe part of our strategy would be to engage the Open Space Board to let them do some of the heavy lifting for us and public engagement so that they can consider the broader picture of how all this comes together and with staff make recommendations to us. There is some interest in the literature and what people have called nature play, which is kind of a term of art for allowing open spaces and parks and perhaps open space in our defined term to be used for things that encourage playing. Whether it's kids doing something with forts or kids, parents sledding, there is a role for our open spaces for active use. And at the same time, there probably needs to be consideration of preservation and areas that really need to be considered for additional preservation and management. And I hope if this goes to the Open Space Board and it comes back to us, that there is consideration and perhaps recommendations both for the concept of nature play, but also for those areas that need more preservation, and perhaps we need to consider how do you do that through our municipal code or otherwise, so that those areas are more protected than they are now. So anyway, I'm hoping that we do engage the Open Space Board and they engage the public and do some of that analysis for us before it comes back to us. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Lipton. Any other general council comments or committee reports or identification of future agenda items? All right, I don't see any others, so just thank you all for coming tonight, and thanks to all the great staff work this evening. Nice to see those of you we don't get to see all the time, and have a great week. See you all soon. Good night, everybody.